Hey folks, welcome into the News 12 Now desk. Thanks for joining us here on this Thursday, April 20th at 8 o'clock here this morning. We are shaping up for another beautiful day in the city of Augusta. We've got a little bit of a chill this morning, but shouldn't be more than just some long sleeves, and then you'll be A-OK once we hit the afternoon. We are expecting some beautiful weather here this Thursday. So that's good news. Now we are talking about our top headlines, some of our biggest stories going on across the CSRA and beyond. Let me get my stuff pulled up here and we will go ahead and get going. But we are starting off talking about a string of some violent crimes we've seen in our community, mainly among the youth. We've had two cases here recently where teenagers were shot and killed. 13-year-old Buddy Brown, 15-year-old Zaire Person. Last night, or a couple nights ago, we told you about rising rates of deadly crimes impacting the youth. The numbers continue to grow, and the community is turning to law enforcement for answers. Our Will Rio sat down with Sheriff Roundtree yesterday to ask about efforts to prevent these crimes and where the cases involving the murdered teens Buddy Brown and Zaire Person stand.
Yeah, right now the sheriff tells me that they're still working on both of those cases, but it's leaving the community with so many questions. Where do we go from here? How do we solve this problem? This is what the sheriff had to say about the current state of gun violence in Augusta. For the last 10 years, Sheriff Roundtree says shootings and homicides have consistently made the headlines, including last year when we saw one of the highest number of homicides and shootings in the last 8 years.
Gun violence has been our albatross here in Richmond County. We try to throw every resource we can at it. Unfortunately, as the time has progressed, the victims and the perpetrators are becoming younger and younger, and that's what's just disheartening.
It's a problem the sheriff says is happening all too often, including almost weekly in Augusta.
We are losing these lives and losing these generations right here in Augusta, and I don't think people see that picture. We see it in law enforcement, but people see it as a headline, and then they move on. I don't think they're taking it serious enough that this is a community problem.
Sheriff Roundtree says there are 3 parts that need to go towards solving this issue: responsible gun ownership and gun safety so those guns aren't stolen, more resources, mentorships, and funding for the youth, and responsibility from the parents in this community. Sheriff Roundtree says so often these kids aren't being looked after, and parents aren't aware kids are bringing guns into their homes.
The parents and the loved ones outraged after a shooting happened. There was no outrage when they were coming in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or leaving for 3 or 4 days, or hanging with a group that you know are guys who are in nefarious habits or selling drugs or in gangs. And you knew this was happening and you're not intervening. And that's why I say it's a societal problem. It's not just a law enforcement.
What can parents tell their kids? How can parents talk to their children about this?
Parents need to understand everything that those kids are bringing into their home. And it's about just being a parent, being a responsible parent. And that's why I say when these shootings happen and kids takes another kid's life, you know, some of that responsibility, and you've seen they prosecuted in other cases, falls on the parent for allowing that gun to be possessed illegally by that juvenile. And I don't think we put enough emphasis on that. We don't put enough light on that. Again, we get outraged too much at the wrong things.
Sheriff Roundtree tells me his community policing efforts have been working and still are. He says violent crimes are down in Richmond County, which according to data we have, they are, except for homicides and shootings.
And we're losing a generation of young people. And I don't think we as a society, especially here in Richmond County, are looking at it that way.
Now, Sheriff Roundtree says moving forward, a big part of crime reduction is going to be technology. He says they're working on their downtown camera project, and they hope to expand that throughout the entire community moving forward.
Will Rio there. Thanks for the update, Will. 2 Richmond County deputies are behind bars this morning, accused of bringing contraband into the jail. Last week, the sheriff's office received a tip that deputies Deborah Griffin and Ellis Belton are involved with bringing contraband into the Charles B. Webster Detention Center. Both have been charged with crossing guard lines with drugs and violation of oath by a public officer. Well, it's been tied up in the courts for years. The Savannah River lock and dam may be eventually coming down. Yesterday, the U.S. District Court struck down the ruling that paused its demolition. All of this stems from a 2019 lawsuit focusing on the needs of the people and the river levels versus the fish and other creatures that live there. Our Craig Allison has been combing through this filing and talking with city leaders to hear what happens next.
See this go back to a lower court is really disheartening.
It's a decision Commissioner Brandon Garrett, who's been fighting this issue for 5 years, says could see the river level be at the mercy of the rain.
Our river is affected once or twice a day by water that is let out of the lake above us. And so basically we have to make sure that we have enough water flowing, and the Army Corps really has never taken into account for all those water releases each day.
This all started with the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, or WIN Act, passed in 2016, allowing the Army Corps of Engineers to make changes to protect sturgeon spawning grounds. They say the lock and dam prevents sturgeon from moving through, and so they presented a plan in 2019 to remove the crumbling dam for a rock weir. But the tests were disastrous.
Should have the ability to maintain the pool and also provide the ability for the sturgeon to migrate upriver. I think the locks, of course, the current system is in place, allows that.
But this ruling isn't the end of the road.
Disappointing that it was not ruled in our favor. However, the fight continues. It's always been my contention that the city of Augusta, North Augusta, should be able to control the level in the Savannah River.
In Augusta, Craig Allison on your side.
Augusta and North Augusta city leaders will meet within the next week with stakeholders in surrounding counties to decide the next steps. A longtime advocate for the homeless here in Augusta has died. Linda Bars has been helping the CSRA Economic Opportunity Authority for decades, acquiring millions of dollars with her grant writing and assisting thousands with homelessness, care, and more. She also helped open the doors of the Homeless Resource Center back in 2017.
It's going to be difficult without her here, but we want to make sure that we pick up where she left off.
The work that she's done and the legacy that she's leaving, I think it's going to speak for itself. And I miss her already. Linda was an amazing human being that we'll never be able to replicate.
The family's holding an open celebration at Warren Baptist Church on May 13th. A wife is accused of killing her husband, and that trial is underway. Sandra Dales is accused of killing Eddie Cruey and burying his body. The state began to lay out its case yesterday. Our Hallie Turner tells us what happened in court.
Well, Laura, the state's efforts are to show Sandra and Eddie were married just like any other couple, but they had their share of disagreements. Eddie stayed in contact with his family even though they do live in Virginia, and they talked 3 to 5 times a week and expected to hear from him during the holidays. But when they didn't hear from him for Thanksgiving in 2019 and into the weeks after, the state says they got worried and came down here to Augusta in December, only to hear that Sandra didn't know where Eddie was and that he left with money, clothes, a sleeping bag, and didn't come back. Eddie's father, Jerry, was the first to take the stand, stating the last time he saw or heard from his son was November 19th of 2019, when Eddie called to thank him for birthday money. Sandra told Jerry she had just received her first Social Security check, and then the phone went dead. Moments later, a text came in from Sandra saying she and Eddie would call back, but they never did. The next time they spoke to her was when they came down in December, and Sandra didn't seem fazed about Eddie's disappearance. Her story was still that he was missing, and he left to go see friends, but Jerry says it didn't add up.
No, because we talked several times a week, and he always told me his plans.
Next, it was James Whittington, who grew up with the couple and has been a close friend for decades. James says he did hear them argue occasionally, but says he never saw it become physical. He thought Eddie was missing and never saw it coming when Sandra confessed to him.
She looked at me and said, "I killed Eddie."
What was your response to that?
Well, I had no words at the moment. I was shocked.
James says he knew he had to contact law enforcement, leading to the next witness, the GBI medical examiner who performed Eddie's autopsy. The state showed the jury photos of Eddie's body. Sandra Dales glanced up to acknowledge the images, but never showed emotion as they went over the 7 lacerations to his head, multiple skull and rib fractures. After lunch, investigator Sylvester took the stand, followed by a crime scene expert who told the jury a soil probe led them to the body. They put it in the ground to test the soil to see if it was disturbed or not. And when they pulled the stick back up, substance substances that were not soil were on the bottom.
Is the bottom of the soil sample that we collected. It actually has some unknown white creamy substance and some hair attached to it.
That's when they found Eddie Crewy buried in a 3-foot, 9-inch deep hole in his own yard. The state rested their case just before 3 this afternoon, and when asked when they would be taking the stand tomorrow, Dales told Judge Stone that she needed time to decide. She has until 9 tomorrow morning when the court is back in session to decide if she's going to testify or if she won't. And if she does decide to testify, she will be questioned by the defense and cross-examined by the state. But the defense starts with their case in the morning, and we'll keep you posted.
And Hallie will be there this morning for that, so we'll have more on that coming up a little bit later this evening. Thanks, Hallie. Yesterday, students at AU were able to see what resources there are for victims of sexual assault. It's part of the university's Wellness Wednesdays. While on lunch or in between classes, students saw groups from campus and across Augusta who were ready to support anyone who needs it. Harrison Lamp, a nurse manager at Augusta University Student Health, says it's important for students to be aware of what resources are available.
It needs to be talked about, and we need to make sure that the students know that we're here for them, that we care about them, and we want to give them as much education and resources as possible.
Groups at the event included the Domestic Violence Center, the Campus Police Department, and Augusta Student Counseling and Psychiatric Services. Grovetown is growing, but some say it may be growing too fast. Neighbors who live in Grimaud Place off of Columbia Road near Appling-Harlem Highway are speaking out about a plan to rezone the area. Our Nick Veland spoke to some homeowners who don't want to deal with that traffic and construction.
Neighbors in this rural Grovetown community are afraid of a potential rezoning request for a business to grow within this neighborhood and add employees.
Taking a quiet rural neighborhood that's been that way for a while and seeing it become ruined with noise and traffic.
Most residents in Grimaud Place have been here since the 1990s, raising families, and some even have grandkids. When the Augusta Radio Fellowship Institute radio station and business offices moved in 2021, they say more traffic comes through the neighborhood and is a concern.
Cars coming through here at 40 miles an hour and you got 5-year-olds on a bicycle. You know, kids only see one thing. It's just dangerous. And it's going to get worse if they allow this to happen.
They tried rezoning in 2005, but neighbors spoke out and stopped it then. Now another rezoning request will bring the property into compliance and allows for expansion, which includes allowing there to be 10 employees. From the showing of 10 neighbors who met with me today, the neighborhood isn't happy with this request.
We do have a problem. We don't want an S1 to start with, because right now they want to build a 5-office space building with a bathroom and a conference room.
Neighbors feel like this process has been forced.
That's the way we feel it. Okay, we feel like it's being shoved down our throat.
Another concern is if this request is granted, what's to stop the property owner to keep asking for more?
Once they get that built, there's nothing to stop them from asking for another S1. It can just keep going on and on and on. And that's why we want to stop it now.
The Columbia County Planning Commission has the recommendation to approve this tomorrow. If that does happen, it will be up for a vote on May 2nd in front of the full commission. We reached out to the applicant, Mark Baranowski, and he says that he was not interested in commenting on this rezoning request. In Grovetown, Nick Veland on your side.
Hey, thanks, Nick. And speaking of growth, people in North Augusta turn out for a public hearing concerned about a new housing complex that would bring more apartments and townhomes off Martintown Road. Neighbors say that'll make traffic worse in the area. News 12's Taylor Martin tells us more about last night's meeting.
It would be called the Hive, and neighbors who live on Pinion and neighboring roads are buzzing about the disaster they predict for traffic and safety.
Their immediate response that had children was, I am moving if this comes in. Breaks my heart.
Neighbor after neighbor all voicing similar concerns for safety, and families looking to move out of safety for their children and concerns for traffic.
Pedestrians, young children, a lot of walkers on Pinion Road, and those using the greenway.
The Hive will cover 175 acres of land between Martintown, Knobcone, and Pinion Roads, and a huge concern tonight, a connection to Pinion Road proposed by the city, a road currently with only one way in and one way out. But the developers say they're willing to work with the city on the concerns.
Of course, you hear there's public objection to it and legitimate concerns. We're willing to work with you on whatever your recommendation may be to address that.
Listening to the concerns, Planning Commissioner Lynn Carter recommended the city to not move forward with the Pinion Road connection. Neighbors say there's still much more they have to say, and they're hoping the city truly listens to make the right decision.
Make us proud and make us all good neighbors.
And just talking to some of the neighbors after the meeting tonight, they feel as though some of their concerns weren't heard, and they're hoping that City Council or the Planning Commission will give them another chance to voice those concerns so that they can hopefully make a change.
Well, we could see a decision on how women in Georgia seek abortions by the end of the week. The majority of abortions in the U.S. are done by taking a pill. As our Georgia State House reporter Abby Kasoris explains, that could soon change in the Peach State.
This ruling continues to drag out, with Georgia women seeking abortion services caught in the balance. The majority of abortions are performed by pill, and mifepristone has been approved by the FDA for more than 2 decades.
The one word I would use to describe it all is pure and utter chaos.
Alicia Hughes, visiting assistant professor at Emory University, has been watching for a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court. The Biden administration has asked the justices to block a ruling from a federal judge in Texas who revoked FDA approval for the abortion pill mifepristone. Hughes says the Texas ruling could have greater implications beyond the drug and challenge the prescription of other FDA-approved drugs for cancer treatment as well as vaccines.
On one hand, we're dealing with this with an abortion pill right now. What if another group decides that they have an issue with a drug that treats another issue?
Georgia Right to Life has more than 30 chapters across the state. Director Zemi Flex says pro-life groups across the state are prepared to help pregnant mothers, and they say an abortion is not the answer.
The abortion pill is not in any way helping women. It will continue to harm women.
The Georgia Life Alliance states that chemical abortions are at least 4 times more likely than surgical abortions to result in some kind of serious complication.
Of course, we hear often the term abortion as health care. Technically, what is happening here, we're not giving health care to women when we're giving them something that could potentially even kill them.
6 out of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court are conservative. That majority led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Still, that does not mean that the majority will side with this Texas judge in his ruling. In Druid Hills, I'm Abby Kasoris.
And they did put a pause on that, so they should expect a decision tomorrow instead of the one they were expected to do yesterday. Okay, take a look at this. Cameras pick up the moment a stolen pickup truck collides head-on with a police cruiser. This happened last week in Lawrenceville, Georgia, as police were helping a state trooper who tried to stop the stolen truck. The police department says the officer and recruit inside only had minor injuries. The suspect is facing multiple felonies. A woman who once trained to become a canine handler at a Georgia state prison now faces 20 years behind bars. Prosecutors say Desiree Riley pled guilty to charges connected to a meth trafficking ring run in and out of several state prisons in South Georgia. She was part of a massive bust in January where 76 people were indicted. Prosecutors say the ring was run by a white supremacist street gang known as the Ghost-Faced Gangsters. Fresh produce is a staple in many households, but those leafy greens can get easily contaminated. Lindsay Gibbs visited a farm that supplies to stores in the CSRA and beyond to show us what farmers do to keep our food safe.
There are 5 varieties of lettuce here at Stone Creek Hydroponics in Georgia. This is south of Lake Hartwell. Now you can see several different stages of growth that the lettuce is in before they can be harvested. Now the biggest concern for farms like this one is listeria. According to the FDA, listeria is a species of disease-causing bacteria that can be found in moist environments, including water, soil, and decaying vegetation in animals. Listeriosis impacts an estimated of 1,600 people each year. water. The hydroponic system they use here at Stone Creek Farms means the lettuce is grown in the water instead of soil. According to the FDA, the hydroponic grown lettuce does not reduce the risk of listeria, salmonella, or E. coli. However, at Stone Creek, water samples are taken every month and sent to a lab at the University of Georgia to make sure there is no unsafe bacteria growing in the water. We asked the owner what people at home can do to keep their home gardens and their lettuce and produce clean from bacterial contamination.
And you walk in the dirt and you come back in and just there'd be like foot dips that you could do. You could have a little mat with bleach in it, a little bleach water, and you could just step in that.
Zach also says after you harvest, it's important to make sure it's stored in a cool, dry area. You increase your risk of contamination if you store it in refrigerators or coolers that may have dirty water that will spread to the produce. Here at Stone Creek Farms, nearly 30,000 heads of lettuce is produced each week, and those go to retailers in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia like Food Lion, Harris Teeter, and Ingalls.
And to reduce your chances of getting listeria, you can keep an eye out for labels that say USDA certified. A young mom is dead after being stabbed multiple times over the weekend in Vidalia. When police got to the scene, they found 21-year-old Casey Jordan suffering from multiple stab wounds. They say an annual block party was in full swing Saturday, and in a matter of moments, things took a turn. Police say they've received very little information despite the large crowd being there. They believe somebody knows something.
Casey Jordan is a person. She is somebody's daughter. She's a mother. She's part of our community, and her life mattered. If it was your daughter, your child, your aunt, your cousin, you'd want somebody to say something, and the family does deserve answers.
Martin says the young mom, daughter, and granddaughter deserves justice. The GBI and Vidalia Police Department are investigating, and they actually did make an arrest in this case. This is Jamie Davis, I believe the name is. Yeah, Jamie Davis here, a Waynesboro woman arrested in Emmanuel County in connection to that stabbing. A middle school teacher now faces charges after a student says the instructor slapped her. Adam Murphy spoke with the mother of the child who came forward, who says she was never notified of this happening.
They didn't tell the cops, they didn't tell anybody.
The emotional pain runs deep for this 12-year-old child who said she was slapped in the face by her teacher at Kennedy Road Middle School in Spalding County.
When the teacher hit me, I was just really shocked. Like, I couldn't believe it happened. And then after she hit me, she hugged me and was saying she was so sorry, but I was so shocked. I just walked out the class and texted my mom.
The student's mother is furious about what happened and said she was never notified about the incident by school leaders.
I wouldn't have even known about it if it weren't for my daughter leaving the classroom, going to the bathroom, and texting me, because they never reached out to me whatsoever.
According to the Spalding County Sheriff's Office, 44-year-old Sojanya Balikurva was arrested Monday for simple battery and given a $1,500 bond. We went to her home to question her about the incident, but she was not there. Sheriff Darrell Dix said, quote, the school resource officer was not notified of the incident by the principal or school staff, nor was he asked to be present during the interview before the teacher was sent home, end quote.
The first thing I asked was, have y'all contacted the sheriff's department? The principal and the assistant principal both said yes. When they walked out of the room, the officer there said no. No one's been contacted.
The Spalding County School District sent this statement in response saying, quote, school leadership followed the standard protocol. The principal gathered evidence and spoke to the teacher and witnesses in his preliminary investigation. The teacher was placed on administrative leave and sent home pending the outcome of the personnel investigation. School leadership met with the parent of the student involved, and then law enforcement was notified. No administrator withheld information, end quote.
If they knew that they were not in the wrong, why wouldn't they have just notified everybody to begin with? I mean, I should have been the first person they notified.
The teacher was charged with simple battery and given a $1,500 bond. A Georgia lawmaker says the recent settlement between Fox News and Dominion is vindication for his state. Yesterday, Fox News and Dominion agreed to settle a defamation lawsuit that accused the channel of spreading lies after the 2020 presidential election. Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says the settlement is vindication for the state, whose election results came into question because the entire state uses Dominion voting systems.
We've done forensic audits. We did a 100% hand recount after the election, and we had a fair and accurate count. I think the trouble that we had, particularly on my side of the aisle, Republicans, is it's been a Republican-leaning state for so long. How did President Trump lose? Simply put, we had 24,000 people just skip the presidential race. They didn't vote for anyone. They left it blank.
A similar defamation trial has been filed by a voting company, Smartmatic, and Georgia election workers filed a claim against Gateway Pundit, a popular right-wing website that spread conspiracy theories about the 2020 election results. A bill that could restart executions by lethal injection in South Carolina is likely headed to the governor's desk soon, but some lawmakers say it could come at the cost of government transparency. State House reporter Mary Green has the details.
Earlier this year, state senators passed what's known as a SHIELD law bill. And Wednesday, the House of Representatives approved that bill in a vote largely along party lines. It could allow South Carolina to begin carrying out executions for the first time since 2011. South Carolina has 3 methods of executing convicted inmates sentenced to die: firing squad, electric chair, and lethal injection. The firing squad and electric chair are currently on hold, pending a court review into their legality. And the state says it can't carry out lethal injections because it hasn't been able to get the drugs it needs to do that since its batch expired a decade ago. This bill, called a SHIELD law, would keep drug manufacturers and pharmacies' identities hidden from public disclosure if they sell South Carolina lethal injection drugs.
Families of the victims cannot get closure because, notwithstanding the fact that a sentence of execution has been handed down, we are unable to carry that out.
The director of the state's prison system has said this bill wouldn't guarantee South Carolina would be able to obtain the drugs, but without it, discussions are impossible. Opponents argue enacting this would cloud government transparency, even keeping lawmakers themselves from knowing who the state is working with and how much money is going toward it.
We're doing more than just allowing the acquisition of drugs to administer this penalty. We're giving away any oversight that the agency has over this process and essentially just letting it all be done in the dark. Don't tell us about it. We don't want to know us about it. Just bring out a dead body.
Both the bill and the amendment do require the state's 2 financial offices to work with the Department of Corrections so that the records are kept in a de-identified condition.
House members amended the bill Wednesday to impose criminal penalties of up to 3 years in prison for people who violate this law. And they added an explicit ban on members of the legislature, their immediate family, or businesses with which they're associated from providing the drugs or medical supplies needed to carry out executions.
I want to make sure that none of us can profit from this SHIELD law that we're about to pass.
The House and Senate versions of this bill are slightly different, so the 2 chambers will have to work out a compromise to send to the governor. I spoke with the author of this bill, Senator Greg Hembry, on Wednesday, and he told me he's optimistic they'll be able to reach an agreement. Reporting from the State House, I'm Mary Green.
Thanks for that, Mary. And Governor McMaster has repeatedly called on the General Assembly to pass a SHIELD law, most recently this year. Oh, do you remember this guy from Tiger King? Well, the Myrtle Beach safari owner can now leave his home. Doc Antle faces several charges, including trafficking animals like lemurs, cheetahs, even a chimpanzee. He's also accused of laundering more than $500,000 along with his business associate to smuggle illegal immigrants across the U.S.-Mexico border. Last week, Antle's team filed a motion for a judge to change the conditions of his bond, which up until this point included house arrest. Antle can now leave his home and even leave the state to travel to Georgia. The Supreme Court has delayed making a decision on the abortion pill by extending the temporary block on a lower court ruling till Friday. The High Court is weighing whether to permanently block a decision issued by a U.S. district judge in Texas. The court's decision means, for now, women can still get a mifepristone by mail as the legal battle continues. A brief order issued by Justice Samuel Alito did not mention how the court will ultimately resolve the case. A delay could indicate some division among the 9 justices. There's another case of young people being shot after a mistake. This time, a group of cheerleaders mistook a car for their own and were fired at. Elaine Quijano tells us it comes after a New York man made his first appearance in court for allegedly shooting and killing a young woman who mistakenly drove into his driveway.
65-year-old Kevin Monahan walked into an upstate New York courtroom today with his feet and hands shackled. A judge denied his request to be released on bail in the shooting death of 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis. Prosecutors say Monahan fired a shotgun twice at a car Gillis was riding in after she and 3 friends accidentally drove up Monahan's driveway Saturday night. As they were turning to leave, one of the rounds struck Gillis.
My daughter was an honors student. She had hopes and dreams of becoming a marine biologist, and this man took that away from us.
After the shooting, the group drove about 6 miles looking for better cell coverage to call 911. She died in the car.
It angers me so badly. I just hope to God that he dies in jail.
In a statement, Monahan's attorney said he believes the case was a series of errors which resulted in a tragedy.
And I jumped back in Keanu's car.
And near Houston, friends of 18-year-old Peyton Washington held a vigil for her last night. The cheerleader is in critical condition after being shot early Tuesday. Her teammates say Washington was with a group of fellow cheerleaders when one of them mistakenly tried to get into the wrong car in a grocery store parking lot in the town of Elgin. Police charged 25-year-old Pedro Teo Rodriguez Jr. with shooting Washington and another teammate.
She's a mentor and a role model to so many kids in this industry. She's an amazing athlete, amazing kid.
The district attorney says other charges could be filed, including for the attempted murder of others in the driveway that night, and the family of Kaylin Gillis will hold her funeral tomorrow. Andrew Lester, the 84-year-old man accused of shooting a 16-year-old boy in Kansas City, is pleading not guilty. Lester is facing 2 felony charges of assault in the first degree. Ralph Yarl was shot in the head and arm after he went to the wrong address to pick up his siblings. He's out of the hospital now, but faces a long road to recovery. Lester pled not guilty before a judge who laid out 5 bond conditions. He has to report to his assigned supervisor within 24 hours of court and then once a month. He can't have any weapons in his home and can't leave the state of Missouri without permission. 2 teens face murder charges days after a deadly mass shooting at a Sweet 16. Hang on. All right, that video doesn't want to work. Okay, 2 teens face murder charges days after a deadly mass shooting at a Sweet 16 birthday party in Dadeville, Alabama. 4 people were killed, another 32 were hurt, some of them critically. Now authorities say these teens will be tried as adults.
The Alabama law enforcement agencies, State Bureau of Investigation, officially arrested and charged Tyreek McCullough, 17 of Tuskegee, and Travis McCullough, 16, also of Tuskegee.
The district attorney says there are still pending charges for the additional people who were injured at the shooting and that the state of Alabama is requesting no bond be given. A civil lawsuit has been filed against the city of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department for the death of Tyree Nichols. The suit, filed by lawyers for Nichols' mother, Rovon Wells, seeks a jury trial and $500 million in financial damages for Nichols' death back in January. The 29-year-old died days after being beaten by a Memphis police officer following a traffic stop. The lawsuit names the Memphis police director and 6 ex-officers, 5 of whom were charged in Nichols' death, and an additional officer who retired before he could be fired as additional defendants.
This has nothing to do with the monetary value of this lawsuit, but everything that has to do with accountability.
Amen.
Those 5 police officers murdered my son. They beat him to death, and they need to be held accountable along with everyone else that has something to do with my son's murder.
The filing accuses officials of allowing the crime suppression Scorpion unit launched by Davis to go unchecked, despite complaints of the unit's aggressive tactics. A warning from the man who runs the Pentagon's program investigating unexplained aerial phenomena, commonly known as UFOs. While many may be balloons, some could be a more earthly threat, advanced Chinese or Russian aircraft.
whatever they are.
There's a whole fleet of them.
They seem to defy the rules of physics, hovering, stopping on a dime, moving at hypersonic speeds.
What was splashed?
Today, the man in charge of investigating UAPs said his office now has 650 reports. More than half have a round or sphere shape, possibly balloons, typically white, translucent, or metallic. Observed at 10 to 30,000 feet. So far, no sign of alien involvement.
No credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity.
Sean Kirkpatrick says this case remains unresolved. A cylinder object spotted somewhere in the Middle East. But this flying object with a tail, he says, turns out to be a plane.
This is the heat signature off of the engines of a commuter aircraft that happened to be flying in the vicinity.
More concerning, Russia or China could have advanced capabilities the U.S. doesn't have.
Could you describe potential threat that might exist out there if they are foreign?
Are there capabilities that could be employed against us? Absolutely.
2 months after U.S. fighters shot a Chinese spy balloon out of the sky, the Washington Post reports leaked intelligence documents not verified by NBC News suggest China could soon deploy a high-altitude spy drone able to travel at 3 times the speed of sound and able to surveil and attack American targets.
The adversary is not waiting. They are advancing, and they're advancing quickly.
The Pentagon's UAP office was created just 9 months ago with 36 experts trying to figure out what's a threat and what's not. Social Security recipients have gotten on average $140 more per month thanks to a record cost of living adjustment. But now the Social Security Administration warns this has led to a surge in scammers. Consumer investigator Caress Jackman explains how to keep your information safe.
It's an announcement the Social Security Administration was happy to release. A bump in benefits, providing financial help for Social Security recipients because of inflation. But according to the Social Security Administration, or SSA, scammers are taking advantage of this record 8.7% cost of living adjustment. Anthony Monaco is special agent in charge of the major case unit at the SSA's Office of Inspector General. He says Social Security-related scams are the most prevalent type of imposter scam across the nation, and this new twist is no exception.
We started seeing letters that looked fairly official, purporting to come from the Social Security Administration saying, dear recipient, dear, Social Security recipient, you need to call this number and you need to activate your cost of living allowance. Well, the problem with that is you don't have to do it. It's Social Security Administration, it's automatic.
Monaco says tactics vary, but consistently contain red flags, usually in the form of the scammer presenting an unexpected problem or situation, then offering a solution with a hefty price tag.
What infuriates you the most when you hear about people being scammed by something like this?
It's just when somebody's in their 70s or maybe their 80s, they just don't have the capability to make it up. So you've essentially made somebody destitute for the rest of their lives.
The SSA says the main warning sign of a scam is if the person on the phone is pressuring you to send money. They also recommend to be skeptical of unexpected calls and messages and to never click on links or open attachments from an unrecognized source.
If there's something wrong with your account, and it's generally something that you notice first, and then you get in touch with Social Security Administration. It's not usually the other way around.
Monaco says if you do fall victim to a scam, report it to the SSA right away by going to ssa.gov/scams. You can also report it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center.
A lot of times, if you report it to them right away, they can freeze the assets and stop the transfer of the money from going overseas. It's a slim road, but they can do it a lot of times.
Monaco says even if you file a complaint, prevention is key, which is why watching out for the warning signs is the sure way of protecting your money and personal information. With this Watching Your Wallet, I'm Caress Jackman.
The SSA also recommends that if you've been scammed, keep all financial transaction information and a record of all communications with the fraudster. That could help recover your money. Well, Apple is now firmly in the banking industry, first offering its own credit cards. Now the tech giant invited customers to open savings accounts. Our consumer technology reporter Jamie Tucker takes a closer look to see how it works.
Traditional banks offer savings accounts that most of us are familiar with, but high-yield accounts are from online banks. No physical locations, and you do all of your banking over your smartphone. And now Apple has a high-yield savings account. Here's what you need to know before you open one. Apple's savings accounts are through Goldman Sachs, the same bank behind Apple's credit cards. It's a high-yield savings account that's currently 4.15%. Traditional bank savings accounts are around 0.35%. That makes a big difference over the course of time. $1,000 in a traditional savings account will earn around $3.50 a year in interest. But in a high-yield savings account like Apple's, that same $1,000 will earn $41.50 a year in interest. Apple savings accounts are connected to customers with Apple credit cards, which earn about 2% cash back. Not as much as some other credit cards offering miles and points, but the cash earned using an Apple credit card can automatically be deposited into the Apple savings account. To apply for the savings accounts, customers must have an Apple credit card. In the Wallet app, then tap Daily Cash, where you'll see an option to open the savings account. The big question is Apple's savings account safe? Well, like most other high-yield accounts, it is FDIC insured for up to $250,000. And Apple insists security for credit cards, Apple Pay, and Apple Savings are top-notch, requiring Face ID to conduct transactions. But remember, if you're doing any banking with your smartphone or a tablet or a computer, never do it over a public Wi-Fi network. Use a long password or passcode that you don't use on any other account. That's What the Tech. I'm Jamie Tucker.
And it's important to note that opening a high-yield savings account doesn't lock you into that interest rate. If the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates again, the high-yield rates will likely drop as well. Well, it is official. The era of sharing your Netflix password is over. The streaming company says account sharing undermines its ability to invest and improve its platform. Users will still be able to add 2 additional people to their Netflix standard or premium subscriptions, but you will have to pay a few bucks extra. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Augusta is all about preparing kids for their future. And last night they hosted their Great Futures event, a night to make a giant leap towards their $5 million goal this year. Alyssa Lyons takes us there.
Some things are as simple as investing in your future or your kids. Last night, that's why Boys and Girls Club of Greater Augusta held the Great Futures event. And what better way to do that than with someone who has experience almost in any alley twice over. Tim Tebow spoke at the club's event, talking anything and everything about the sacrifices and commitments he made on and off the field. He also touched on issues that plague a lot of kids, athletes or not today. The club serves more than 4,700 kids in the CSRA. More so, it offers kids an outlet that they may not have otherwise.
So we've got after school and summer programs. In the summer, we're full day. After school, we open until 7 o'clock in the evening. We're giving them homework help. We're doing STEM activities. We're doing art and dance. We're preparing them for college, for careers. We're just making sure that they're prepared in their academics and that they're well-rounded, that they've got leadership opportunities and, everything that they need just to be great citizens.
Tim Tebow joins a long list of visitors to the chapter. Herschel Walker and Kirby Smart has appeared at the Great Futures events in the past. Dan Booth will be back with more later on this evening.
All right, thanks, Alyssa. Always a great event out there. I remember being out there last year for Kirby Smart's visit, and so it was pretty cool to see. All right, we end with our main man, Will Volk. So what do you do when you are older but not quite senior center age yet, and you still want to be involved in your community? Well, the Columbia County Experience Club is something you can check out. It's for people who are 50 and older. Will Volk stopped by to see what it's all about.
It's another day in the club. Wine, snacks, and good times.
Visiting with friends is always fantastic.
Shelley Hewitt discovered the Experience Club 2 years ago.
I started with the book club, and now I am kind of going into the hobbies.
Twice a month, a few dozen club members meet up.
Mainly we have females in our group, but as you can see today, there's a couple gentlemen that have joined us, so we're open to ladies and gentlemen to join the group, so anybody that's 50 plus is more than welcome to come.
Columbia County Programs and Events Manager Janet Wheatley says the Experience Club is all about having fun and making friends.
They're not quite ready to say we're seniors and we want to go to the senior center, but they're getting to that age range where they're looking for something to do. They may be at home during the day or in the afternoon.
That's why the county created this club for people 50 and older. Today, they're learning how to make charcuterie boards. They do a different activity each month and even take trips sometimes.
I had no idea that they did so many different activities. I thought it was just a book club.
While the book club is part of it, Hewitt says the Experience Club is a lot more than that.
This is definitely something that's added a lot to my life, and I really love it.
In Columbia County, Will Volt on your side.
It's an experience club, not just a book club. There's a whole lot going on there, so it's pretty exciting stuff. And if you're interested in joining a club, we've got a link to more information on our website. Again, you do have to be at least 50 to join. So if you want to do the wine and charcuterie boards and you're not 50, got to find somewhere else to do it. But link on the website. And you can also go to our website to find out about any more of these stories and more. You just go to WRDW.com. If you are watching this up on the website right now, be sure to download our WRDW streaming app. You can do that on your Roku, your Fire Stick, your Apple TV, whatever your favorite streaming device is. Just search WRDW on there and give that a download. We've also got a YouTube channel if you want to check that out too. I'll show you how to do that real quick. So you go to YouTube, WRDW News, and you click on WRDW News 12. You can subscribe right over here, and look at that. We're live right now showing you how to do it. So you can do that. Both of those things are free. Those will give you all of our I-Team investigations, first alert weather forecast, sports coverage, live newscast, Aerial Augusta. Everything you're going to need is going to be up there on the streaming app and on the YouTube channel. So follow along with both of those to stay up to date with everything going on in the community. That's going to do it for our top headlines for this Thursday. We've got Morning Mix coming up in about 15 minutes or so. Zaina and Cliff will have the latest on the TV side of things. I won't be here tomorrow, so we will see you back here on Monday for top headlines. Also tune in a little bit later on this morning. We'll have some more news right here at the News 12 Now desk, so we'll see you back here then.